We are learning that there are developments in terms of the injured soldiers in the DRC. For more on this, I have with me in studio SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Thanks very much for joining us, Sophie. So what is the latest? What are we hearing about the injured soldiers? Where are they as we speak?
Well, my sources in the DRC tells me that they are about to cross the border between the DRC and Rwanda. The name of the border is Grand Barriere. It's a French name, and they will soon be heading to Kigali. We know that this process started yesterday with preparations, and it's led by MONUSCO, or the United Nations, to ensure that those who are injured are being brought back to South Africa for better treatment. And we are told that the convoy has just arrived at that border, as I pointed out, and now they are being processed, and therefore they will then go to Kigali. As I pointed out earlier on, according to sources within the DRC, is that the decision was to use this route because it's quite short and it will be easier for the evacuation process to be concluded.
What do we understand about what was behind the delay in moving them?
Well, there was a contestation in terms of the route to take, because there was a view from South Africa that they would prefer airlifting their injured from Goma airport, but unfortunately the M23 rebels who have taken over eastern part of the DRC and Goma and the airport wouldn't allow that. Secondly, there were talks in terms of trying to go through Burundi, perhaps that wouldn't work, they wouldn't agree. And also Uganda was another option, as you know, that the repatriation was done via Rwanda and then Uganda. And then finally they have agreed, because South Africa felt that if they go through Rwanda, they are likely going to be humiliated, as it happened with those European mercenaries we saw who were paraded in terms of them being evacuated to Rwanda. And therefore there were discussions to ensure that these are African soldiers. Yes, there might be tensions in terms of different stakeholders, but the reality is this is an African child who is being evacuated, and therefore you don't want to humiliate Africans. Africans can't humiliate Africans. And I think finally there was an agreement to try and manage this process, but still there was no way there wasn't going to be a leak in terms of the process having started. And we know that it is under the auspice of the United Nations. So I think Rwanda and M23 and all stakeholders felt that they must respect the international body or the world body in terms of the plea to ensure that you get these injured soldiers out of the eastern part of the DRC. Some are very critical, so that you are able to give them treatment so that they can recover. And I think this is where the process is. We will see the reports perhaps later today when they have finally been processed at the border in Rwanda, and perhaps them taking off, coming home. I think it will be a relief for the South African government, because they will then get better treatment at one mill in South Africa, where we know that when soldiers are injured, they are taken to the military hospital. Perhaps there might be even views to get other strong capacity to assist. But I think this will be a relief. But also, this speaks to the softening of stance in terms of all the role players, because you know that a few weeks ago, this was not a possibility at all. But the fact that South Africa today will then negotiate a process to finalize the evacuation of these injured soldiers. On the other hand, Rwanda assisting where Rwanda can assist, and the M23 allowing the convoy to go. It speaks to the softening of stance, and there's hope that perhaps the engagements of all stakeholders as they continue, we will be in a position to see at some point in time a ceasefire and perhaps all stakeholders on the table, and with the process led by the president of Angola, the Luanda talks, to ensure that there's peace and stability in the DRC, because the reality is the M23 has captured large tracts of areas in the eastern part of the DRC. In other words, DRC is now divided into two parts, and therefore you really have to engage everybody to find a lasting solution. We saw President Felix Tshisekedi speaking to the Secretary of the UK, saying that he's willing to engage all stakeholders, but then made an about 10 again, saying he will not engage the M23. But there's pressure from the East Africa community, from SADC, from the United Nations, including other countries, to ensure that there's an inclusive process. We saw the former president of the DRC, Joseph Kabila, saying that if the process is not inclusive, you are not going to find a lasting solution. And who to say this better than Joseph Kabila, who was there during the Sun City talks, where they signed an agreement with Rwanda to ensure that there's peace in the eastern part of the DRC, and therefore he knows better, and he is a former leader of that country. So I think we are slowly getting there, but it's still a long way to really find a solution, but also to ensure that all stakeholders are talking and there's a peace process underway, particularly in relation to ceasefire, because you don't want a situation where Congolese are suffering the way they are currently.
All right. Sophie Mokoena, thank you very much for speaking to us and giving us that update. She's SABC News International News Editor.